When somebody says, oh, it's funny because it's true. A lot of times, when you go to a comedy show, it's kind of like, oh my God, that's so true. I never thought of it that way. So a lot of the content that I make has a lot of similarities with those comedy shows. And the reason why is comics are geniuses when it comes to taking something that everybody knows, but kind of putting it in a way that they've never thought of, right? Like explaining it in a way that they haven't like connected the dots. People wouldn't get it if they can't relate to it. And the reason why people get it is because it's a universal truth. I get it because I've been there. I get it. I know what that feels like, or something like that. When you see Instagram and you see people telling stories, whenever somebody tells a story, it's so fucking forced. It's like, oh yeah, last week I went to a Taylor Swift concert, and watching Taylor Swift just reminded me of how, like how I should own my power. And, the lesson that I learned is like, I'm like, that sounds so fucking forced. You just wanted to talk about Taylor Swift, and somehow you wanted to force it into a lesson. So you forced it together. There's really no connection there or anything like that, right? I see so many stories like that on Instagram where they start telling a story and then they just force it to a lesson where I don't really see the connection there. So we don't want to do that. That's the reason why we've been practicing for the past 7 weeks, digging into our past and digging our own stories and trying to connect the dots, right? What we've been doing is we've been practicing that muscle of like, okay, let's go deep. Let's see what really happened. Let's get a little vulnerable. Let's go into our shadow. And let's connect the dots between all of these things that happen within our own life. And I think once we're able to do that fully, once we're more self-aware, we can start becoming more socially aware and see things that are around that are more universal truth, right? Truth is simple, lies are complex. Truth comes in sentences, lies in paragraphs. The reason why that Taylor Swift or those kind of story doesn't really make sense is because it's not the truth, it's forced. When you say a universal truth, and sometimes it can be vulnerable, sometimes it can be embarrassing, but when you say that truth, something hits where everybody goes like, yeah, I get it. So when you say the truth, people just get it. You don't have to explain, you don't have to try to force it to fit. They just get it, right? And without universal truth, none of my carousels will work. Somebody will come to me and say, hey son, like, how do I make carousels? I'm like, okay, give me a myth that you think is that you think you can debunk, and the truth, and then give me an example that contradicts that myth. And for some reason, people find that so hard. But the thing is, unless you personally experienced it yourself, it's going to be hard for you to find an example. So you can't do this unless you personally experience the lesson. And if you don't experience it, you won't be able to connect the dots. Here are the 4 different ways that you can find universal truth. So number 1, common situations, right? So 1 and 2 are common situations and common observations. Common situations are the ones, like the type of situations that I've been in, that are so common that once you say it, everybody's like, oh, I get it. When I was like working in my 9-to-5 job, corporate 9-to-5 job, every time I get into an elevator and somebody's in the elevator with me, but I know who he is, but we're not really close or anything like that. I don't want to have this small talk, chit-chat conversation, so I just take out my phone and I pretend like I'm doing something on my phone so I don't have to talk to him. Like, if I say that situation, a lot of people are going to be like, oh, I know exactly what you mean. I've definitely been in those awkward situations before. So those are kind of like the common situations that we're in, right? Okay, next is common observations. Common observation is something that you see around, right, in society. You see, people that have this type of personality tend to be like this. People that have this type of personality tend to be like that. A good example of that is when I hire people, when I work with people, they're the type of people that do everything the right way. And then there are type of people that do the bare minimum. Actually, like 90% of people that I meet do the bare minimum. So when I happen to meet the type of person that goes way over and beyond, I make sure like that I build a relationship with that person, because I know how rare that is. Even if there's no position in our company, if I meet somebody like that, I'll hire them, because I know that like that person I can put in anywhere and will succeed. Like, that's how valuable that skill is, right? The reason why I bring that up, it's an observation that I made between, okay, there's this type of person and then there's this type of person. And if you can just recognize that, in your hiring, like, it'll make your life like 10 times easier. Last is I actually get a lot of ideas for content from just watching TV, movies, watching a comedy show. I get a lot, like, for example, if you watch Curb Your Enthusiasm with Larry David, like that entire fucking show is all about this I never thought of it that way moments. They're so good at extracting this universal truth from life that everybody understands and displaying it in a way that you've never thought of. So to give you an example, Nature Channel was on, and I saw like this lion going after a gazelle, and the gazelle will like kind of run away for a little bit, and then like kind of hang around, and the lion will approach more, and then he'll run away a little bit. But the gazelle doesn't just completely run away full. It's almost like he's playing with him. He runs away a little bit, and then as soon as like the lion catches up, he runs a little more, right? Something like that. And I've seen this with like alligators going after ducks. Like I see the duck moving a little bit more, and then the alligator catches up, and then he gives a little bit more. And I'm always wondering, like, why don't they just run away, go far away from the predator, right? And it's because they're trying to conserve energy. They don't want to just like waste energy running unless they absolutely have to, right? And when I saw that, immediately I connected the dot between that and how I see most people run their business. Like most people that I know, they get a few clients and now they're they're booked for the next 3 months. They stop selling. It's like the gazelle that, oh, I'm safe now. So I don't have to run anymore. Oh, I'm safe now. This is how everyone runs their business. Like most people, they're like, oh, I'm booked for the next 3 months. I can't have any. I'm safe now. I'm gonna stop selling. 3 months later, it's like, holy shit, I need clients, and they start sell, and then I'm safe now. They stop selling, and that's why every business, like, that's why there's like this line where most business owners can't pass, right? Because as soon as they're safe, they stop selling. As soon as they're safe, they stop selling. When what you should be doing is you should never stop selling and keep raising prices because you never stop selling. That was like a quick little dot connecting I did, while I was watching that. Lastly, sometimes I use like science or data or some sort of a scientific study. Like the other day, I did a post about how there was like an Israeli parole board where they did a study and they said in the morning the parole rate, like the way these judges like give parole, meaning letting the prisoners go, where like 65%, they will let 65% of the prisoners go, right? But then that number slowly goes down, and like right before lunch, it goes to almost zero, where they don't let anybody down. And that was because like these judges, like when they were hungry, like everything that these people were saying like sound like an excuse. I'm like, this person's not gonna change. Like they weren't willing to hear it. And then as soon as they have lunch, like the number goes right back to 65 and then down again, right? So when I read that, like I was like, oh shit, this is fascinating. And it's kind of like you can connect the dot between there and okay, like if you were to meet a client for sales or something like that, when would you rather meet them right before lunch or right after lunch? So once you start seeing these kind of scientific data or something, this scientific study, you can connect the dot between the study and how it relates to your business, and what lesson you can take away, right? The actual assignment this week is come up with the example, which is the universal truth, and then come up with truth, which is actually the lesson. The example I'll give you, they did a scientific research where they give the these people option to choose their painting, and these people option to not choose their painting, and at the end this happened, right? Or, I can give the example of how, like, when you're on Tinder, even if you like somebody, you're gonna want to swipe just to see if there's something better. And that's why the more options you have, the less happier you are. So the lesson is, the more options you have, the less happier you're gonna be. But what I can do is I can add a myth, which is a lot of designers think that the best way to provide their value is by giving more options, right? A lot of people, when they sell products, they think that by giving more options, it's gonna make their business better, right? The customers are gonna be happier when you give them more options. But the truth is, customers are going to be less happier if you give them more options. The less options you give, the more happier they're going to be. And then the example is either I can use the scientific study or the example for Tinder. The best way to do this is to have some sort of a universal truth sandwiched between a myth, what most people think, versus a truth, which is what is the actual truth. So here's how it plays in carousel, right? So why you haven't succeeded yet? Here's the myth. You think starting is half the battle. Like everybody is like, starting is half of the battle. Just start. It's the most important part, right? But think about this now. Here comes the contradicting example. This is the universal truth, right? Something that everybody would get. How many times did you start strong? And then I put the picture of the new year. How many times did you say, okay, this year it's going to be different. This year I'm going to go to the gym, and then not finish, right? So the truth is, starting is easy. Finishing is hard. So start messy, finish strong. That's a great example of like myth of starting is half the battle, but the truth is starting is easy, finishing is much harder. And I sandwiched it between an example. This week's assignment, what I want you to do is I want you to notice things in your everyday. For the next week, pay attention to everything around you. Pay attention to like people when you watch your movie. Pay attention to everything that's happening. And what's going to happen is as soon as you start really paying attention to everything around you and try to look for these connections, you might actually find something. But like, oh, that reminds me of this. This reminds me of this lesson. So just be really aware this week and try to find those universal truths around you, rather than trying to force it by going back and find it. Try to find it from, like, get inspired from the environment around you, and then try to tie it to a lesson that you've experienced. A bonus exercise that I want you to do, this is completely unrelated to the assignment. I want you to try to do, we always do this every quarter, not every quarter, but we try. Do one selfless act without expecting anything in return. And then I want you to share your experience with your group. So for example, it can be as simple as like opening a door for somebody, or buying coffee for someone, or giving $1 to the homeless person. And try to do one selfless act without expecting anything in return. And I want to do more of these like in the next quarter, because what it does for me when I do these selfless acts, what it does for me is it's a great reminder of why I do this work. Because I'll do a free coaching call or something like that, and it makes me feel so good. I'm like, oh, this is why I do it. And it actually gets me excited to make content. It makes me excited to share more content and create more content and things like that. So this exercise alone actually motivates you to do what you want to do. And I want to end with this final word. This is from Richard Feynman, who's a physicist. And this is what he talks about, like what I said about truth. Truth is simple. It's very clear. When you say the truth, everybody gets it. And here's the quote. You can recognize truth by its beauty and simplicity. When you get it right, it is obvious that it is right. At least if you have any experience. Because usually what happens is that more comes out than goes in. The inexperienced, the crackpots, and people like that make guesses that are simple. But you can immediately see they are wrong. So that doesn't count. Others, the inexperienced students, make guesses that are very complicated. And it sort of looks as if it's all right, but I know it's not true. Because the truth always turns out to be simpler than you thought. Thank you, everyone. Have a great week. I'm sure we're going to be talking a lot this week, because I really, really, really want to help you guys through this assignment. Because I think it's going to be one of those assignments that really helps you create banger content. So thank you. Have a great week. We'll see you all. And cheers.
Happy Sunday.
Bye, Miguel. Bye, Larissa.
Bye, Sean.
Bye.